Well, hello. So, what we're going to do today is talk about the difference of JPEG versus RAW photos and why you might choose to use one or the other. Now, you may notice that I've come out in the middle of the high noon sun in Houston. It's nice and muggy and 90 degrees. I'm wearing a white shirt because, well, it's freaking hot outside, but it's not the best for pictures. I don't know that because I'm a brand new photographer and I really don't know what I'm doing. Okay, so we have our lovely assistant, Alexa. Now, let's see what she does with the camera to get a beginner exposure. I've already explained to Alexa which knobs change which settings, but that's the only instruction I've given her. So Alexa, go ahead and make your adjustments and make that picture look as good as you think it should. What did we end up with? Okay, so our exposure is going to look like f8, 1/200, and 100 ISO, correct? Okay, let's look at our light meter and see where that is. So you can see it's a little bit overexposed. Now, I don't want to ruin this for her, so let's let her take that picture as it is. Okay, Alexa has taken her pictures. It's 90 something degrees out here. It's Houston and humid. You can notice I'm dripping with sweat, so let's get back to the studio and finish this video.
Okay, we're back in the studio. I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of taking a shower and changing my shirt because, well, it was a little hot and I got a little sweaty. Really quickly though, before we move on, if you're getting something out of these videos, do me a favor and click the like button. And while you're at it, you might as well click subscribe so you don't miss anything. All right. Now, before my shower, the first thing I did was downloaded my card because, well, a famous YouTuber told me to. Also because I was super excited to see what kind of pictures my wife took of me. So here I am, opening up my picture, and what do I find? Even at an aperture of f8, I'm out of focus. Drat. But that's okay. Because this video is not about how to focus your camera, although maybe we should do one. Anyway, what we are talking about is JPEG versus RAW. And as you can see in these two pictures, there are differences in both of these file formats. Let me backtrack a little bit. A JPEG image, or .jpg, is named after the organization that created it, the Joint Photographic Experts Group. It's a compressed file format that's considered lossy because, well, once the information is cut out of it to compress the file, it is gone forever. You can never recover it. On the other hand, a RAW image is, well, uncompressed or raw. Each camera manufacturer uses a different file extension. For example, Canon uses .cr3. I'm not going to get into every brand and their specific file extensions, but the chances are that if your camera has any other file name than .jpg associated with it, that is the raw file.
Okay, I want you to notice that we have our two pictures. We have the .cr3 file here and the .jpg file here. The .cr3 file is the Canon RAW file. The JPEG is the Canon compressed file. Do note that it is a neutral color, it is compressed and already processed through the camera. I do have my camera set to a neutral color profile because I like to start editing my raw photos from a neutral color base. Alright, really quickly, all I'm going to do here is prove a point. The sky is really blown out. We can barely see any detail. Now I'm on the .cr3 raw file and I'm going to take the luminance of the blue and just bring it down. Immediately we can see this bright blue sky. If I do the same thing in the JPEG, I take the blue down, it doesn't affect it as much, and not until I get to the extreme here. And when it does affect it, I see the banding in the clouds. The gaps here, the gaps between these bands, is that information that was cut out of this to compress the file. Over here I don't have that banding because none of that information has been taken out. What the sensor captured is what's in the file. Hopefully that proves my point without taking too much time. I could continue to edit this JPEG and try to make it look as good as possible, but the truth is, it's just never going to look like that RAW picture will look after only a little bit of tweaking.
All right, where were we? The benefit of using a JPEG image is that it's pretty much ready to go. The colors are fairly accurate and the file size is already small enough that it can upload quickly to your favorite social media site. The drawback to a JPEG image is that the compression process cuts out some of the information that we could have used to draw out more detail and define colors ourselves in that picture. So when you take a bad picture, well, you're pretty much stuck with a bad picture. The benefit of a RAW image is that the information in that file is all there. We can use that information later on to define the picture, change our colors, and extract more detail from that photograph than we could have if we had compressed it already. Because of this, the information in that file is so malleable that if we miss our exposure or don't get our white balance correct, we can change that in processing later on. There are a couple of drawbacks to using RAW files. For one, the file sizes are larger, so they may take a little bit longer to transfer. If you're using a good card and a decent computer, then it shouldn't be that noticeable. The other drawback is that the picture's not going to look finished right out of the camera. You're going to have to use a software such as Lightroom or Photoshop to help it reach its maximum potential. These programs can be a little costly or require a subscription service, so they may not be for the casual photographer. But if you're trying to become pro or trying to get better and you really want your pictures to look good, they're kind of a necessity. In either case, there are some things that neither file format will overcome, such as missing your focus. So when should you use a JPEG versus a RAW file format? My argument would be that a beginner should shoot both RAW and JPEG. The reason for this is because the JPEG will help them narrow down good and bad exposures. When you get a bad exposure, you'll find it in that JPEG image. But because you have the RAW photo alongside it, you can kind of recover that picture if it's a little bit off. In our case, it's overexposed. The other benefit of doing this is so that you have something to compare to when you're starting to edit your RAW photo. Sometimes we get a little colorblind, or because we've stared at a screen so long, blues become purple and reds become orange or whatever. And so when that photo goes a little too far, you'll always have that JPEG image to refer back to. This is great specifically for beginners because they can always kind of stay around that JPEG image and learn that, well, a lot of times less is more. Over time, once you've learned how to really manipulate the RAW photo to make it look as good as it can look and developed a style of your own, you can drop shooting the JPEG image. That'll save you a little card space and make your file transfers a little simpler. Once you've learned how to manipulate a RAW image, I can't see any argument for using JPEG anymore. We spent all this money on high quality camera gear and huge megapixel counts only to compress the image and make it look like poop coming out of the camera? That just doesn't make sense. And if you're one of those people that's on a budget and you're using a lower quality camera with a smaller megapixel count, wouldn't you want to give your camera every edge you could possibly give it? So why not shoot in RAW if your camera is capable so that you can pull out as much detail as possible. So to conclude, in my opinion, a RAW photo is technically better because there is no information cut out of it. And artistically, I feel like it's superior to a JPEG image because, well, I can paint the picture and make it look the way I want it to look. A beginner should use both JPEG and RAW so that they can start to narrow down their exposure settings and also learn how to edit the RAW photo. And everyone else should use RAW. I don't really see a reason not to. One last thing, a word of caution. A RAW file is so malleable that it could be considered an empty canvas. Now that's good and bad because it allows you to really edit the photo the way you want it to and develop your own style. But you should never share that file with someone else. Well, in most cases. The worst thing for you would be for a client to get a hold of that file and either not know how to process it and think that you're awful, or to process it really poorly and then put that forward as a representation of your work. So be protective of them. Don't share them. Learn how to edit those files and only send forward your processed files, the ones that you've manipulated and made look the way you want them to. Okay. Well, hopefully I've answered any questions you had about RAW and JPEG images. If I have, punch the like button. If you have further questions or any comments about what I've said here today, let me know down below. And lastly, I know we're all extremely busy, so click the subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Until then, I'll see you.